Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, a podcast about the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you are a nature-loving therapist who works with children, this podcast will help you start taking your work outdoors into nature and help you grow a profitable nature-based therapy practice or program that connects children to nature and changes their lives and yours forever. I'm your host, the ever honest, always 100% real, Laura Park Figueroa. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for over 20 years. But 7 years ago, I almost left the field entirely. I was so burned out. And nature-based therapy is what saved me. It reignited my love of my work, and I saw profound changes in the children that I was working with. I'm the founder of Outdoor Kids OT and the creator of the TGO approach, an evidence-based framework for nature-based pediatric therapy services. I've helped dozens of pediatric therapists start and grow successful nature-based practices through my business coaching and online programs. The latest of which is the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, TGO for short. TGO is an online membership site with loads of resources to support you every step of the way as you start and grow your nature-based therapy work. You can find out more at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Working outdoors with children can be a wild ride. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's jump in. Hello, friends, and welcome to our first 10-minute takeaway. I mentioned on the last episode that I am changing the format of these research reviews that I do, where we talk about an article and some takeaways from the article to apply to our nature-based work with children. I was doing these as a 2-minute takeaway and including them in every episode, and I just found there was too much. There's too much rich literature, and I wanted to be able to talk more in depth about the articles. So now I am going to do these every other episode. But before we dive into talking about childhood nature exposure and its impact on adult mental health, I want to give you some exciting updates about the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community and what is coming down the pike. This is July of 2022. There's something hard about podcasts because when you're recording, you're in the moment, but then you know that people might listen to this a year later. So I always try to give the date anytime that I talk about something like this. So we are going to be this month in July of 2022, for the very first time, we are going to be opening the doors for the paid areas of the TGO community. So the free areas will always be free. We have a free discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities area, and trainings and resources from me and a few other people in our community there for you for free. So those spaces are always there for free. But for people who want to go more deeply into nature-based practice, we have 2 different areas of the TGO community that will be paid areas. So you will pay to get access to those, like a membership site. So the one thing that I want to say is I have changed a little bit how I am going to do this. So as you know, I am, or may not know if you're new here, welcome if you are. But if you've been following me for a while, you know that I'm super transparent about my business process and what goes on behind the scenes. And one of the things that I have to say is that this process of starting a membership site has been very challenging for me. It has stretched me in ways that I have not been stretched in many years as a business owner, because I'm really trying to think about how to give value to people and also have it work for me as a business owner with everything else I have going on, because I am still running a private practice too. So one of the things that came up for me was that even I was confused about what was going on in the TGO community, the membership site. It's weird to call it a membership site because there are the free areas. You do have to join to be a member. So I guess I could say that. So in the TGO community, I was even getting confused where to put what, and because I just have so many things to offer, what I've created in my businesses in the last few years, the products that we've offered, and some of those will be part of this site. And then also with my business coaching program. So I was like, what goes where and how am I going to organize this? So I think we now have a structure in place that is going to make a lot of sense and simplify things drastically. So that is always good, because if you are running a business, if you confuse people, they don't buy, right? You want to keep things in your business, even in your running your practice, you want to keep things as simple as possible. That's one reason why for the first 6 years of my business, we did not really offer individual services. We focused on groups. That was our main thing that we offered, and we do it really well. And so my sharing this setup of the TGO community with you may help you in your own business too, to just remember, keep things simple. Simple is best. So the TGO community will have the free areas, and then the TGO library is what will be a done-for-you resources area. And I was using the words practitioner den, like I wanted it to be all cute, like little bears in a den together learning, but I think that's really confusing. I am keeping the business area named the business hive because I feel like worker bees make sense with working. But what I've changed is that the practitioner den will be instead the library, because that is a word that defines what it is. So the TGO library is going to be a space with done-for-you resources to support your nature-based therapeutic work. So the business resources are not in that library. What is in the TGO library, which is done-for-you resources only, is trainings, curriculum, camp materials, treatment plans, printables for doing nature-based therapy, things like that you can access on your own when you need them, print them out, done for you resources inside of the TGO library. I will not be doing any live training or any live events inside of that TGO library. The library is really just what it is. It's a space for resources. Now, in the TGO Business Hive, which is the level of the TGO community where you get everything in the TGO community, you get access to the library, but you also get business coaching from me. So that is where I'm going to be running weekly business coaching calls. You will get access to my Business Bedrocks program to help you set up your business for success, and loads of resources to run a successful nature-based practice. So that is where you'll get templates, forms, spreadsheets, all the things that you need to run a business. So those two areas are coming. The TGO library will open the cart will be open the last week in July for both of these. The TGO library will contain those done for you resources, and the TGO Business Hive will be where you can enroll and get business coaching from me. That is where I'm going to be showing up and really serving business owners. So that has streamlined things significantly. I hope it's really clear to you what sits where in the community. And as always, you're welcome to stay a free member forever. You don't have to join the paid areas, but I really wanted to find a way to support people who want to go deeper in this work. So that is what will be happening. The last week in July, the cart will be open. Please reach out to me with any questions you may have. You will see me promoting this on social media and on this podcast as we go. And if you're not on the email list, get on the email list. That is how you will really know, because I know we're all busy, and you can join the email list at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. So, okay, that's it for announcements. That took way too long. And now I'm going to dive into the article for today, which is titled Life Course Nature Exposure and Mental Health Outcomes, a Systematic Review and Future Directions. This was in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health in 2021, March of 2021. So it's about a year old, very recent research. And in this article, which I have to say, I could talk for 3 hours on this article and not cover everything that they said, because it is one of those articles where you just are amazed that this type of research can even get done. There were 4 different authors working on it, and the teamwork that had to be done to get this article to publication just amazes me. So, the purpose of this article was to critically assess empirical observational studies reporting relationships between early life exposure to nature and later life mental health outcomes across all age ranges. The research questions there were 4 of them. So as I said, pretty complex research, and this article is extremely detailed in the review that they did. They followed all of the right protocols. It's a very good article. The research questions were: 1, what types of mental health benefits are associated with early life nature exposure? 2, how strong and consistent is the evidence relating to associations between life course nature exposure and mental health? 3, to what degree does the current evidence support a critical period or time variant effect of nature on mental health? And 4, what theoretical and methodological challenges and unanswered questions remain for future studies? So I am not going to go into the findings of all of these research questions. Like I said, that would probably be a 1-hour long episode, but I have reviewed the article, and I will share the design and the findings and the takeaways specific to us as nature-based pediatric therapists. So this was a systematic review, and they focused only on studies that examined early life nature exposure and later life mental health outcomes. So interesting to us as pediatric therapists, right? Because they're looking at what we do as pediatric therapists by bringing our work into nature with children is giving them that early life nature exposure. We are layering those experiences of being outdoors, right, during our therapy sessions that children may not have had if we didn't do our therapy outdoors with them. So we're adding to their early life nature exposure by having our therapy services outdoors. Even if their family is very outdoorsy and takes them outdoors, we are adding to by having our sessions outdoors. Okay, they included 29 studies. And the interesting thing is that these were primarily longitudinal and cross-sectional studies with a retrospective measure of childhood or lifelong nature exposure. So many of these studies included large numbers of children that they tracked for many, many years. There were 3 categories of measure of nature exposure. So those 3 categories were the availability of nature, so the density of the tree cover, the green areas near a child's house, things like that. And then the second category was frequency of nature exposure, so the duration of their exposure to nature, and that was usually self-reported. And then the third was quality. The quality of the nature areas, right? The quality of the nature experiences. And those were self-reported as well, or they used neighborhood audit tools, which were less common. The quality measure was a little less prevalent in the studies that they reviewed. Most of the studies looked at availability of nature and the frequency of accessing that nature during childhood. Okay, and they sought to link life course nature exposure with a range of mental health outcomes, including 5 different mental health outcomes. So, number 1, the incidence of mental disorders. Number 2, psychiatric symptoms. Number 3, behavioral problems. Number 4, cognitive function. And number 5, subjective well-being. So the findings were that, taken all together, the findings, quote, generally support a significant relationship between early nature exposure and better mental health or lower risks of mental disorders. And interestingly, another quote, no study found a significant detrimental main effect of early life course nature exposure. So we are looking at something here that has, this is me speaking, we are looking at something here that has, we are looking at nature as having a potential ability to decrease the risk of mental health challenges later in life that has no detrimental main effect. Like, I mean, that this is like, I know I'm preaching to the choir telling all of you this, but it's just really cool to think about that, about nature. You know, most of the research has found actually, I haven't seen in any research a detrimental effect of being outdoors with children, but also the fact that it can have such a significant relationship to mental health and adulthood is just so cool in a study that was as robust as this. They did mention, however, quote, the total number of studies is small. Evidence pertaining to each specific mental health outcome is limited. So what they're saying here is that those 5 areas that I just mentioned, the incident of mental health disorder, psychiatric symptoms, behavioral problems, cognitive function, and subjective well-being, when you look at each of those individually, because the number of studies is small, it's hard to say individually, and I'm going to go through each of those. But individually for each of those, it's hard to say the evidence is strong for each one of those, but taken all together, there is a positive effect of nature for all of those areas. Childhood nature exposure was most consistently related to a lower incidence of mental health disorders in adulthood. So that's the one of those 5 areas that they found the most consistent evidence to support. Multiple studies suggested that child nature exposure has a protective role for schizophrenia and ADHD, which I found really interesting that they singled out studies on those. Now, that might just be where the most research is. I know there's lots of research on children with ADHD and nature. So that was an interesting finding. And one study in particular that they reviewed found childhood nature exposure to be tied to lower rates of bipolar disorder, eating disorders, mood disorders, depressive disorders, and substance abuse in adulthood. So again, just wide-ranging effects, y'all. It's really cool to see this. There was a general finding of childhood nature exposure reducing behavior problems. And I believe there were only, if I'm remembering right, I didn't put it in my spreadsheet here, but I think there were only 5 studies that looked at behavior. But interestingly, one study found reduced behavioral problems in preschool children who were offered more outdoor play, and behavior remained the same for kids that did not get more outdoor play. So that is something I think that we all kind of know. And again, I know when I'm saying this stuff, I'm preaching to the choir. If you're listening to this podcast, you're like, well, obviously, right? Sometimes we find things in research that we know intuitively as therapists, but that was an interesting finding because I think we are seeing, especially in this time, as I'm recording this in 2022, just coming out of the pandemic, we are seeing more incidents of behavior challenges in children just because of the mental health challenges of the last few years of dealing with the pandemic, right? So it's an interesting finding that outdoor play may be a mechanism to help support reduction of behavioral challenges in preschool kids, especially those really young ones. And then finally, the cognitive and subjective well-being findings were more inconsistent. So they found some that supported, some that did not support, some that were inconclusive. So that was the cognitive findings and affecting subjective well-being in adulthood were harder to say definitively. Okay. And finally, the one comment that they made that I do want to quote exactly as they said it was, overall, the effects of greenness seem to be more pronounced for disadvantaged individuals. And specifically, let me look it up in the article. I want to read you it exactly as they said it because I don't want to get this wrong. Okay, specifically including comparisons of females versus males, so they were more pronounced for females, women who are widowed versus married, and those socioeconomically disadvantaged versus those who were advantaged. However, one study displayed diverging evidence that males benefited more from greater early life nature exposure. But the key takeaway here to me is that for disadvantaged populations, essentially, the effects of greenness seem to be more pronounced. So that is just so important to think about because so many nature-based therapists, in my experience, really want to serve. They want to bring, therapists in general, we really want to serve people who have disadvantages, whether socially, economically, whether they have disabilities. We are serving people and want to help bring equity and equality and inclusion in accessing nature, right? And accessing the benefits of nature. And so seeing that this is shown by research to be that the effects of nature exposure seem to be more pronounced for people that may really need it. It's just cool. I don't know if I stated that really clearly, but anyway, I'm moving on. thing about podcasting is you always want to go back and re-record. And I have tried to train myself to just say, no, continue, moving on, keep talking. All right. So, okay. The last few things on the findings here were that they did say it remains inconclusive if there's a critical window for nature exposure. So what they're saying here is that it's complex, right? They did say that the association between nature and mental health is very complex, and we can't take things that apply to one population and apply them to another population. There's so many variables at play here. And they had to state, because they were doing good research, that it's inconclusive if there's a critical window for people being exposed to nature to have these good mental health outcomes as adults. In general, nature is beneficial for us all around, right? So we can't say that kids must get exposure to nature in childhood in order to have good mental health outcomes as adults, obviously. And I always, I'm a very black and white person. I like to have very clear, definitive, true statements. And what I'm learning as a researcher and as I go through my PhD program and just looking at all of the research here is that we have to start getting more comfortable in the gray. We have to start really embracing that research is complex, life is complex. No one study is going to give us this definitive answer that will give us the exact thing that we want, right? So we have to look at all of this research in the complexity of life itself. And I am trying to lean into that and know that we're never going to have all of the exact answers that we may want from research. Okay, let's do the takeaways that I have written down for us as pediatric therapists applying this research to our practice. Obviously, the takeaways are pretty straightforward from this. Nature offers lifelong mental health benefits for children. I think that is very clear from this systematic review, that nature may offer protection against mental health disorders later in life. Some other takeaways are that there's no negative side effects of nature. Like this is so important to note that there's not a negative side effect of taking our therapy work outdoors into nature. And that's something that's actually coming up in a lot of the interviews I'm doing for my own research too. When I ask people about the negatives, they're quick to say, yeah, the weather's hard sometimes, but actually it's kind of a benefit too. It teaches us to adapt. It teaches us to problem solve and deal with real life challenges, So I guess there could be some negative side effects of sunburn or getting hurt somehow maybe, but in general, taking our work outdoors is a positive thing to do. And this research supports that, especially for children's mental health. A few other things. Nature-based therapy, like I just mentioned, may offer specific benefits for people who are, quote, disadvantaged in some way. And then finally, nature may offer a space for children to engage in therapy with less behavior getting in the way of their participation in the therapy process. And again, this is supported by, my research is not published yet, nor is it written up, but what I'm seeing in the interviews that I'm doing is that therapists often report that there does seem to be less of a quote unquote power struggle, to get kids engaged or coaxing kind of to get them engaged in the therapy activities that we have in our sessions when we are out in nature. And so this research seems to support that nature has this research seems to say there's some limited evidence. There weren't a ton of studies included in this that focused on behavior, but it does give some limited evidence to say that nature may be a space where we might see less behavior challenges. So that is it for today. I hope you got some encouragement from this article that what we do in our work in nature with children is so supportive to their long-term health and well-being throughout life. That is one of the most powerful things about nature that I just love. So thanks for listening today, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, exploring therapy in the great outdoors. If you liked what you heard in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so we can share the magic of nature-based therapy with a wider audience of therapists who work with children who desperately need connection to nature nowadays, just like we do. If you're ready to take the next step in this adventure, join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. The TGO community is a private space just for nature-based pediatric practitioners. We have loads of resources there to support you as you start or grow a nature-based practice or program. Our free TGO community has a discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities section, as well as free video trainings, research article reviews, and book recommendations from yours truly. Head on over to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to join today. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors.